Introduction. Friends, welcome to another exciting video where we dive deep into the world of films. Today, we're talking about a movie that doesn't just entertain but grips you with tension, fear, and psychological suspense. Yes, I'm talking about Curve, a 2015 thriller that takes a simple road trip and turns it into a terrifying fight for survival. If you enjoy thrillers that are packed with emotion, unexpected twists, and characters pushed to their limits, then this movie is definitely for you. And if you're visiting our channel for the very first time, don't forget to subscribe so you never miss our breakdowns of some of the most intriguing movies out there. In today's video, we're going to explore Curve in detail. We'll discuss what the movie is about, where and how you can watch it, and what makes it such a standout film in the survival thriller genre. But that's just the beginning. We'll also dive into the movie's storyline, characters, cast performances, technical craftsmanship, and all the behind-the-scenes work that went into bringing this intense story to life. You'll also find out on which OTT platform or satellite channel you can currently watch Curve, so if it's been on your watch list or if you're hearing about it for the first time, you'll have all the information you need. Let's start by talking about the movie itself. Curve is a psychological thriller that revolves around a young woman who, after a terrifying encounter with a hitchhiker, finds herself trapped and alone in a wrecked car on a deserted mountain road. With no cell service, limited resources, and a growing sense of danger, she must fight to survive both physically and mentally. The film is an exploration of human resilience and the will to survive in the face of seemingly impossible odds. It's not just about what's happening outside the car, but also what's happening inside her mind. And that's where the movie truly hooks you. Now let's move into the technical aspects of the film, things that most casual viewers might not notice, but which make a huge difference in how the story is told. From the cinematography that captures the isolated, eerie beauty of the wilderness, to the sound design that builds suspense with every creak and silence, every technical element in Curve works together to heighten the tension. The editing is tight and purposeful, keeping the audience in the same confined, claustrophobic headspace as the protagonist. The film's music, while minimal, is deeply atmospheric and adds an emotional undercurrent to the otherwise nerve-wracking experience. Moving on to the production side, we'll talk about how the movie was planned and brought to life. We'll explore the pre-production phase, where the script was developed and the cast and crew were assembled. We'll then look at the actual filming process, including the challenges of shooting in remote locations, and how those conditions added to the realism of the movie. After that, we'll go into post-production, how the final cut was assembled, how the sound and effects were polished, and how the movie was marketed and released to the public. We'll also cover the budget of the film, whether it made a profit, and what kind of reception it got from critics and audiences alike. Of course, no movie discussion would be complete without talking about the cast and their performances. In Curve, Julianne Hough plays the lead role, and her performance is both emotionally powerful and physically demanding. We'll talk about how she prepared for the role, what her character goes through in the story, and how she managed to carry most of the movie on her own. We'll also take a look at the supporting cast, especially the actor who plays the mysterious hitchhiker, and how their chemistry and conflict drives the entire narrative. I'll also give you a spoiler-free review of the movie, sharing my personal thoughts on its strengths, what sets it apart from other survival thrillers, and why you should consider giving it a watch. We'll talk about the pacing, the emotional depth, the direction, and how effectively it builds tension. Plus, I'll share some behind-the-scenes facts and trivia that fans of the film will find interesting. Things like the real-life inspirations behind certain scenes, or how specific shots were created. So, whether you're a movie lover looking for your next thriller fix, a fan of survival stories, or someone who enjoys learning more about how movies are made, this video is for you. Make sure to watch till the end because we've packed it full of information, insights, and fun facts that will make your viewing experience of Curve even more enjoyable. Alright friends, let's not waste any more time. Let's dive into the world of Curve 2015. Alright friends, buckle up, literally, because the story of Curve 2015 begins on the road and quickly veers into nightmare territory. First, it feels like any ordinary road trip movie. We meet Mallory, played by Julianne Hough, a young woman driving cross-country to meet her fiancé. She's got a lot on her mind, second-guessing her decisions, dealing with wedding nerves, and staring at an uncertain future. But just when you think you're settling into a mellow character-driven drama, boom, the plot slams on the brakes and takes a sharp, terrifying turn. Mallory's car breaks down in the middle of nowhere, but of course, like every good thriller, along comes a mysterious stranger. Enter Christian, a rugged hitchhiker who seems helpful, charming, and totally trustworthy, at first. Mallory offers him a ride, and the film lets us breathe for a minute, giving us this false sense of security. It even flirts with a little flirtation between them, just enough to make you think, hey, maybe this is a road trip romance now. But no, this is Curve. And things are about to go south, fast. That easygoing charm. Christian's true nature reveals itself in one of the film's first big turning points. He threatens Mallory, taunts her, and makes it very clear he has no good intentions. Now what was just a quiet drive becomes a fight for survival. Mallory, thinking fast, swerves the car and crashes it on purpose. Here's where the title Curve comes to life. She literally drives off the road and into the side of a mountain to escape him. But fate doesn't reward bravery so easily. The crash leaves Christian thrown from the car, and Mallory trapped inside. Lone. Injured. Stuck in the driver's seat with a jammed door, no cell service, no one around for miles, and winter closing in. Now the movie flips. The pacing tightens. The road trip is over. We're locked into one location, the wrecked car, and it becomes Mallory's prison. The narrative becomes a psychological survival thriller, playing almost like a one-woman show. And this is where the real tension begins. She's cold, hungry, injured, and desperate. Every creak of metal, every distant sound in the woods could mean danger, or rescue, or worse. You're stuck with her in that car, and the film makes you feel every minute of it. What's fascinating here is that the movie doesn't need to jump timelines or mess with chronology to keep things interesting. It's linear, but within that simplicity, it squeezes out every drop of suspense. The narrative knows exactly what it's doing. It slows time down, forces you to live in the moment with Mallory, to feel the psychological weight of being trapped. Every second stretches out. Days pass. She begins to hallucinate. You start questioning what's real and what's not right along with her. Is she imagining footsteps? Is someone coming? Has Christian died? Or is he still out there waiting for her to give up? Then comes another turning point, a moment of choice. Mallory either accepts her fate or fights back. And let's just say, she doesn't go down quietly. The emotional impact of the story really kicks in here. It's not just about surviving physically anymore. It's about overcoming fear, trauma, and the paralyzing grip of helplessness. The film gives us a heroine who starts off unsure and ends up doing things she never thought herself capable of. You'll find yourself cheering not for big action moments, but for small victories. A move, a plan, an inch of progress. What Curve does so brilliantly is take a very simple premise. Woman versus wilderness, woman versus predator, woman versus herself, and stretch it into a relentless, nerve-wracking ride without ever leaving the car. It's a story about being stuck in every way possible, emotionally, physically, mentally, and clawing your way out inch by inch. No time loops. No non-linear gimmicks. Just real-time survival, raw and unfiltered. By the time the final act rolls in, you're not just watching Mallory try to escape, you're willing her to make it. Every heartbeat, every breath, every icy gust of wind feels like it's happening to you too. And when the narrative finally bursts open with a confrontation you've been dreading and anticipating in equal measure, it's nothing short of electric. So if you're looking for a story that keeps things tight, personal, and deeply intense, Curve delivers. It plays by a simple rulebook but plays it so well that it keeps you hooked from the very first turn of the wheel to the final moment of silence. Let's talk about character development in Curve. And let me tell you, this movie is all about one character, one transformation, and one of the most intense emotional journeys you'll see in a survival thriller. Meet Mallory. She starts off as just another young woman behind the wheel, driving cross-country to meet her fiancé, second-guessing her life choices, probably listening to soft indie tunes and wondering if she's making a huge mistake. You've seen this type before in romantic dramas, right? But Curve takes that familiar setup and says, what if we trap her in a wrecked car, pit her against a psychopath, and force her to survive on sheer willpower? Suddenly, we're not dealing with a passive character anymore. We're watching a transformation that's raw, real, and impossible to look away from. In the beginning, Mallory is hesitant, uncertain, emotionally fragile. You can see it in her phone calls, in the way she talks to herself, in the look on her face when she picks up Christian on the side of the road. She's polite, maybe too polite, the kind of person who says yes to a stranger just to avoid being rude. That's not a flaw, it's relatable. She's trying to be kind in a world that doesn't always reward kindness. Her decision to give Christian a ride feels like one of those little things you do out of obligation, the kind of decision you don't think twice about. Until it all goes terribly wrong. Enter Christian, the perfect mix of charm and menace. He's not just the antagonist. He's the catalyst for Mallory's entire transformation. At first, he plays the helpful stranger, full of calm confidence, a smile that's just a little too tight. But when his true nature comes out, it's not over-the-top villainy. It's cold, calculated manipulation. He enjoys control. He plays with fear. He doesn't just threaten Mallory physically. He breaks her emotionally. Christian is less of a character with a deep backstory and more of a walking force of chaos, like nature or time. Inevitable, dangerous, and without mercy. He doesn't need a complex motivation. He exists to push Mallory to her absolute breaking point. And that's where Mallory's arc kicks into high gear. When she crashes the car to escape him, she doesn't magically turn into a hero. She panics. She cries. She gets angry. She freezes. She breaks down. But what makes her development so powerful is that she never gives up. Inch by inch, day by day, she changes. She becomes resourceful. She starts to fight not just to live, but to reclaim control over her life. It's subtle at first. A shift in posture, a more determined look, the way she talks to herself, the way she plans. You start seeing her mind adapt to the situation. She's not just reacting anymore, she's making choices. There's no mentor, no support system, no one to rescue her. Her character growth is all self-driven. She goes from being a passenger in her own life to someone who takes the wheel, literally and metaphorically. And it's not about big, heroic gestures. Her victory is surviving, crawling forward when everything in her body is telling her to give up. It's about learning to trust her instincts, pushing past the guilt and fear, and digging into a strength she didn't even know she had. The confined setting of the car makes her growth even more intense. You see every flicker of emotion on her face, every decision play out in real time. What's fascinating is how her relationship with Christian, though twisted and terrifying, becomes the crucible for her growth. He doesn't change, not really, but Mallory's view of him does. She stops seeing him as a monster to fear and starts seeing him as a challenge to overcome. Their dynamic is built on power, control, and the shifting balance between victim and survivor. Every interaction becomes a test of strength, of will, of intelligence. By the time the tables turn, you realize Mallory isn't the same woman who offered a ride out of politeness. She's sharper, tougher, emotionally scarred, yes, but also emotionally stronger. She doesn't just endure, she evolves. Her development is the heart of the story, and it gives the film its emotional weight. You're not watching explosions or action set pieces. You're watching a quiet but seismic shift in one woman's soul. That's what makes her such a compelling character. She becomes someone you root for, not because she's perfect or fearless, but because she learns to fight through fear, and that fight feels real. So, when we talk about character development in Curve, it's not about complexity for the sake of it. It's about honesty. About watching someone crumble, pick up the pieces, and claw her way back toward the light. It's gritty, it's raw, and it's unforgettable. Let's dive into the performances in Curve, because this film doesn't rely on a massive ensemble or flashy stunt casting. It's tight, intimate, and basically runs on the raw energy of two main actors. You've got Julianne Hough as Mallory, and Teddy Sears as Christian. That's your core, your engine, your entire emotional roller coaster. And believe it or not, these two take that limited setup and absolutely ring it for every drop of tension, fear, and emotion possible. Let's start with Julianne Hough. Now, most people know her from Dancing with the Stars, musicals, or rom-coms, but Curve is a whole different beast. This role asks her to shed all glamour, strip everything down to the bones, and carry the entire film practically solo. She's on screen for almost every second, often with no one to interact with except a broken car, a bleeding leg, and her own racing thoughts. And the way she handles that. Totally impressive. She doesn't just act scared, she is scared. You feel it in the tremble of her breath, the twitch of her fingers, the darting eyes scanning for hope or help that never comes. She makes you believe she's freezing, starving, bleeding, hallucinating, and hanging on by a thread. That's not easy to pull off, especially in a confined space with almost no dialogue. What's really compelling about her performance is the emotional range. She doesn't go from zero to screaming in every scene like a typical horror victim. Instead, she simmers. She moves through panic, grief, desperation, anger, and determination in a way that feels completely organic. There are moments where she's so still, you can practically feel her thinking. She doesn't just react to danger, she processes it, which makes her struggle feel real and personal. That kind of subtle acting, the kind where silence does more than words, is where she shines. It's not just a physical performance, though that's certainly part of it. It's emotional endurance on display. Now let's talk about Teddy Sears as Christian. This guy. Terrifying. Not in the over-the-top cartoon villain way. No maniacal laughter or dramatic monologues, but in that quiet, unsettling is-a-serious messing with you way that gets under your skin. At first, he's all soft voice, polite smile, friendly eyes. And that's what makes it so chilling. You don't see the threat coming. He plays the part of the charming stranger so convincingly that when the switch flips and you see what's really going on inside, it hits hard. He doesn't go full psycho. He stays unervingly calm, like someone who enjoys the power he holds and knows exactly what he's doing. Sears' performance works because he gives Christian just enough humanity to make him believable, but keeps you constantly guessing. Is he just broken? Is there something deeper, darker? You never get the full answer, and that makes him scarier. His energy is always controlled, his tone measured, and that quiet control creates a constant threat that lingers even when he's off-screen. Even when he's not physically there. His presence looms over the film, and that's thanks to how effectively he establishes the character early on. The chemistry, or rather the anti-chemistry, between Hoff and Sears is electric. Their scenes together are laced with tension. It's like a chess match where one player is terrified and the other's enjoying the game way too much. You can feel the imbalance in power in every word exchanged, every look. And when the tables start to turn, when Mallory begins to push back mentally and emotionally, the subtle shift in dynamic between them is all in the performance. No big speeches, no overacting, just cold stares, trembling hands, and a growing fire in Mallory's eyes that says, "I'm not done yet." There's not much of a supporting cast to speak of, and that's by design. This is a film that isolates its characters for maximum psychological effect. Any other faces that pop up are brief and peripheral. They're only to highlight how alone Mallory really is. But honestly, it works. You don't need a crowd when you've got two actors pouring this much intensity into every frame. So if you're watching Curve expecting typical horror performances with screaming teens and predictable reactions, forget it. What you get instead is a minimalist acting showcase. A raw, stripped-down, claustrophobic thriller powered by two leads who give it everything. No bells, no whistles, just grit, fear, and quiet strength. And the result? You're glued to the screen, not because of what's happening around the characters, but because of what's happening inside them. That's the kind of performance that stays with you. Let's talk about direction in Curve, because director Iain Softley doesn't just tell a story. He traps you in it. From the very first frame, he makes it clear that this isn't going to be a breezy road trip or a slow-burning drama. It's a claustrophobic, nerve-twisting, psychological ride that doesn't let up once it takes that fateful curve off the road. And how does he achieve that? With some seriously clever, deliberate, and gutsy directorial choices that turn a small, contained film into a relentless survival experience. First, tone and mood. This film is soaked in dread. Not the loud, jump-scare kind, but that creeping slow burn anxiety that builds and builds until you're practically holding your breath. Softley creates a world where isolation is not just a setting, it's a character. He uses silence, long pauses, and natural sounds to draw you into Mallory's solitude. The wind howling outside the car, the creak of metal, the ticking of her wristwatch. These aren't just background noises, they're pressure points. He makes every quiet moment feel like it's about to explode. It's not just suspense, it's tension in its purest, most unnerving form. The way he uses space is genius. Most of the film takes place inside a wrecked car, and let's be honest, that sounds limiting. But Softley turns that limitation into his greatest weapon. He leans into the confined setting with tight, suffocating close-ups and uncomfortable angles that make you feel stuck right alongside Mallory. You see the frost gathering on the windows, the blood seeping through her jeans, the steam of her breath in the cold. Every inch of that car becomes part of the story. And as the hours tick by, that small space starts to feel like an entire battlefield. Pacing is another one of his secret weapons. The movie doesn't race, it crawls. But not in a boring way. It's deliberate, measured. He lets moments breathe. He lets fear settle in. When Mallory's alone and trapped, the camera lingers just a little too long on her face. It makes you uncomfortable, makes you impatient, and that's exactly the point. You start to feel her helplessness. It's almost as if the film is daring you to sit in the discomfort with her. And when something finally does happen, a sound, a movement, a flicker of light, it feels 10 times more intense because of that slow, methodical build-up. Softley also knows how to flip expectations. Just when you think the story is heading one way, like a romantic detour with a stranger, or a horror thriller with a loud villain, he twists it, subtly but effectively. The early scenes are almost deceptively warm and casual. Sunshine on the road, open skies, helpful stranger. It lulls you into a false sense of calm. Then he slams on the brakes. And once the crash happens, the tone drops like a stone. Suddenly, the world's cold, the color palette shifts, and the comfort is gone. Just like that, you're in survival mode and there's no going back. And then there's the visual storytelling. Softley uses light and shadow like a psychological map. Early on, things are well lit and inviting. Post-crash, everything's dim and blue-toned. He doesn't need to tell you Mallory's slipping. You see it. And in the quiet moments when she starts talking to herself or seeing things, he blurs the edges of reality just enough to make you question what's real. But he never overdoes it. No flashy hallucinations or dream sequences. Just subtle visual distortions that make you feel like you're losing your grip too. One of the most powerful choices Softley makes is letting the camera stick with Mallory. Not cutting away, not giving you relief. He forces you to stay locked in with her, to feel every beat of anxiety, every scrape of fingernail against glass, every drop of water she desperately sips. There's no escape for her, and Softley makes sure there's none for you either. And that's not just great direction, that's psychological warfare through cinema. Even when Christian is on screen, Softley keeps the focus sharp and minimal. He doesn't glamorize the antagonist. He keeps him cold, off-center, unpredictable. You never quite know where he's going to show up or what he'll do next. And that unpredictability feeds directly into the tone. It's this balance of restraint and dread that keeps the audience leaning forward, eyes wide, nerves frayed. So in Curve, direction isn't just about calling the shots, it's about creating an entire experience. Iain Softley doesn't flood the screen with chaos. Instead, he leans into quiet horror, into creeping fear, into isolation. He takes a small, simple story and turns it into a slow-burning pressure cooker. With just a car, a girl, a psycho, and a whole lot of snow. He turns minimalism into a masterclass in tension. Let's get into the cinematography of Curve because wow, this film is a masterclass in how to make a confined space visually gripping. When you think of a car as the main setting, your brain probably goes, okay, how exciting can that be? But the cinematographer in Curve clearly saw that car not as a limitation, but as an opportunity. A metal box of tension, a glass cage for the viewer's nerves. The way the camera works inside that space is nothing short of brilliant. It squeezes every drop of visual intensity out of every cramped corner. Let's start with the framing. Most of the shots are tight. Very tight. We're talking close-ups of Mallory's face where you can see every freckle, every bead of sweat, every twitch of panic. It's like the camera is trapped in the car with her, breathing the same frozen air. This kind of framing does something sneaky. It makes the audience feel just as stuck as she is. There's no escape for the character, and there's none for you either. The car becomes a cinematic prison, and the cinematography makes sure you feel every inch of it. And then there's the use of lighting. Before the crash, the light is soft, warm, natural. Sunshine floods the highway. Everything looks peaceful and familiar. But once things go sideways, that cozy light disappears fast. Post-crash, the lighting shifts dramatically. Cold, desaturated, almost metallic. The natural daylight that filters through the broken windshield feels distant and unforgiving. Night scenes inside the car are pitch dark with only tiny shards of moonlight or flickering dashboard lights cutting through. It's haunting but not flashy. There are no neon floods or theatrical backlighting. Just raw, minimal, realistic lighting that says one thing loud and clear: you're alone and no one's coming to help. One of the most impressive visual tricks the film pulls off is how it uses reflections. There are moments where the camera catches Mallory's reflection in the rearview mirror or the side window, and it's subtle but powerful. It reinforces her isolation. It makes her look fractured, like she's splitting apart under the pressure. And when Christian is outside the car walking around or watching her, sometimes he appears as a shadow in the reflection, which is way creepier than just showing him outright. It's this kind of visual restraint that keeps the tension at a constant simmer. Now let's talk about movement or the lack of it. Inside the car, the camera barely moves. It's often locked in place or shifts just slightly, like it's trying not to breathe too loudly. This lack of motion builds pressure. It makes every small movement, Mallory reaching for something, shifting her weight, trying to crawl, feel like a massive event. And then, when she finally does escape or something violent happens, the sudden burst of camera motion hits like a jolt. It's all about contrast. Stillness, then chaos. It makes the intense moments even more intense. One of the most visually striking sequences is when Mallory is trapped and begins to hallucinate. The cinematography becomes dreamlike, but still grounded. The focus blurs slightly. The cold light from outside flickers. Shadows seem to creep in just a little faster. It's not full-blown surrealism. It's subtle distortion, just enough to make you question what you're seeing. The lines between real and imagined start to blur, not because of special effects, but because the camera itself is disoriented. It mirrors her mental state without ever breaking the film's grounded aesthetic. The landscape shots, few and far between, are used like exclamation points. Wide shots of the empty road, the towering snow-covered hills, the vast silence of nature. They're beautiful, yes, but they also underline how remote and helpless the situation is. The car looks tiny against the backdrop of the wild. These shots don't just provide visual relief. They emphasize just how far away help really is. The cinematography makes the environment a character, cold, distant, and absolutely indifferent to human suffering. And then there's the way the cinematography treats time. Long takes are used sparingly but effectively. They stretch moments, make seconds feel like minutes. You watch Mallory shiver, think, hesitate, and struggle without a single cut, and it drags you right into her emotional state. There's nowhere to hide, for her or for you. It's visual honesty, and it's devastatingly effective. So yes, Curve doesn't have sprawling sets or massive action sequences, but the cinematography doesn't need any of that. It builds tension through control. It finds beauty in bleakness. It creates a visual language that speaks in gasps and whispers instead of shouts. And by the end, it's not just Mallory who feels like she's been on a journey. It's you too, because the camera never let you look away. Let's talk editing and pacing in Curve, because if you think editing is just about cutting from one scene to the next, this movie is here to school you. Curve takes that concept and says, nope, we're going to make you feel every cut, every pause, every beat of silence like it's echoing inside your chest. The editing in this film is like a psychological metronome. It controls your breathing, your anxiety, your expectations, all without you even realizing it. Now, here's the fun part. Curve doesn't have a fast-moving, jump from location to location kind of flow. This is a one-location thriller for most of its runtime. So the editor had to be clever. Really clever. Because when your lead actress is stuck in a wrecked car for most of the film, and you can't rely on action sequences or fast edits to keep things exciting, you have to create rhythm from the invisible. And that's exactly what happens here. The pacing is slow, intentionally slow, especially in the middle act. Not slow as in boring, but slow as in suffocating. The editor holds shots longer than your average thriller. There are stretches of silence where nothing really happens, but everything's happening internally. Mallory's stuck, she's calculating, she's breaking down, rebuilding, and every cut is spaced just right to match her shifting mental state. When she's panicking, the cuts are quicker, more erratic. When she's thinking, the editor gives her space, lets her sit with a problem, lets the silence stretch until it almost becomes unbearable. You get to live in those quiet moments with her, and that's where the tension really brews. Transitions are handled with surgical precision. There are no flashy fades or disorienting jump cuts. Everything is smooth, clean, and almost invisible, which is the best kind of editing when you're trying to immerse an audience. For example, when day turns into night inside the car, it doesn't feel abrupt. The light slowly dies, the sounds shift, the color temperature changes, and suddenly you realize, without even noticing a hard cut, that you're now trapped in the dark. That kind of seamless transition adds to the film's psychological grip. It's like the movie changes mood on you without permission, and you're stuck adapting. There are also moments where the editing does this brilliant thing. It withholds. Something tense happens, your heart is pounding, and instead of giving you a quick release or reaction shot, the editor lingers. No fast escape. Just the aftermath. That's especially true in scenes with Christian. After a creepy interaction or a threatening line, the film doesn't immediately cut away to show Mallory's response. It holds on him, just a second too long, and then cuts to Mallory, often in silence. That delay builds dread. Makes your brain do the work. And in horror thrillers, that kind of delayed reaction is gold. The pacing of the story is also finely tuned to match Mallory's arc. The first act is brisk. Introductions, setup, that ominous encounter with a stranger. Then the crash happens and boom, time slows to a crawl. You're suddenly in survival mode. And the editing reflects that shift. Everything is more deliberate, more internal. But just when you think the film might coast on stillness for too long, the tension starts to ramp again. Small discoveries. With a growing sense of purpose. The editor lets these beats sneak up on you so you're always just a little bit off balance. And let's talk about those hallucination moments. The editing gets a little hazier there. Cuts feel dreamlike, time stretches unnaturally. Scenes don't quite connect in a linear way, and that's the point. Mallory's losing her grip, and the film wants you to feel like your grip on the narrative is slipping too. But again, it's subtle. The film never shouts, "This is a dream," or throws in crazy montages. The edit just slightly shifts reality, using rhythm and shot order to make you question what's real. By the time the third act kicks in, the editing speeds up again. But not in a chaotic action movie kind of way. It's tighter, more urgent. There's a goal now. The film matches Mallory's rising determination with a quicker pace, sharper cuts, and shorter transitions. It's like the edit starts running with her. You feel momentum, you feel time press down, and you don't even need a ticking clock to know something's about to snap. What's wild is that Curve could have easily fallen into the trap of over-editing to compensate for its limited setting. But it doesn't. Trusts its story. Trusts the silence. It uses pacing as a weapon. The editing isn't just about rhythm, it's about emotion. It's about placing the audience inside the mind of a woman who's physically stuck but mentally evolving. So by the end, when the pace accelerates and every cut feels sharper, you're not just watching, you're racing right alongside her. And that's what makes the editing in Curve such a sneaky, under-the-radar triumph. Now let's get into the soundscape of Curve, because if you thought music was just background noise, this movie is about to rewire your entire brain. The soundtrack and score in Curve don't just support the story, they manipulate it. They twist it, stretch it, and bend it until you're not sure if you're hearing a melody or your own nervous system short-circuiting. This is not a film with a big sweeping orchestral score. No. This is a film that whispers, scratches, and hums directly into your spine. From the start, the music, or the intentional absence of it, sets the tone. In the beginning, when Mallory's driving down those sunny highways and everything seems sort of peaceful, the score is subtle, restrained, almost non-existent. It's like the soundtrack is sitting in the back seat, watching silently, waiting for its moment. And once the crash happens, boom, that moment arrives. The music doesn't explode into action. It creeps in. It begins to coil around scenes like fog in the dark. Instead of trumpets or strings, you get low drones, eerie hums, sharp metallic echoes, and these unnerving pulses that seem synced with Mallory's heartbeat. It's more like atmospheric tension than music, but that's what makes it work so perfectly. And then there's silence. Oh, the beautiful weaponized silence. The film knows exactly when to strip the soundscape bare. You'll hear Mallory breathing, the faint creak of metal under pressure, the distant wind howling outside the car, and nothing else. That silence is deafening. It amplifies every tiny sound that follows: the scratch of her fingernail, the squeak of a shifting shoe, the rattle of a frozen seatbelt. The silence is its own kind of score, making you hyper-aware of every noise, like something might burst through the stillness at any second. It's not silence for the sake of calm, it's silence that threatens you. But when the music does rise, slowly, deliberately, it feels earned. There's a kind of audio tension that builds in layers. A low rumble here, a distant drone there, then maybe a sharp violin scratch or an electronic pulse. And suddenly you're not sure if you're hearing a score or Mallory's sanity unraveling. The music doesn't just accompany her fear. It is her fear translated into sound. It blurs the line between internal emotion and external environment in a way that's deeply unsettling but totally effective. There aren't many themes in the traditional sense. No recognizable tune that repeats. No heroic motif that swells when she fights back. Instead, the film leans into tonal motifs, unsettling sounds that recur in various forms. A single rising tone might appear in several scenes, but each time it feels more urgent, more strained. It's like the music evolves with her, growing darker, harsher, sharper as the situation gets worse. And when she begins to lose hope, the score dips into almost total minimalism. Sparse notes, hollow echoes, sound that doesn't fill the space, it empties it. What's really fascinating is how the score plays with the audience's instincts. Normally in thrillers, you know when a jump scare is coming because the music cues it up. Rising string tension, ominous bass line, then bang. Curve says nope. Plays with that expectation. Sometimes the music will build like something horrible is about to happen, and then nothing does. Other times, something awful will happen, and the music gives you no warning at all. This unpredictability keeps you on edge, makes you flinch at shadows, and trains you not to trust your own senses. It's psychological trickery through sound. And let's not forget how the music shifts as Mallory starts to shift. When she's at her lowest, the score goes cold and detached, but when she starts to find her strength, the music doesn't turn triumphant. It becomes focused. Still eerie, still spare, but with a sense of direction. The chaos in the audio starts to organize, just like Mallory's thoughts. It's like the score is mirroring her emotional clarity, sharpening with her will to survive. By the end, the music isn't telling you what to feel. It's dragging you through those feelings, sometimes kicking and screaming. It's atmospheric, it's minimal, and it's terrifyingly intimate. This is a score that lives in the walls of the film. It doesn't play over the movie, it bleeds through it. It whispers when you least expect it. It disappears when you need it most. And when it finally decides to rise, it doesn't shout. It sinks right into your chest. Alright, let's dive headfirst into the swirling depths of Curve's themes and messages, because this film is way more than just a woman trapped in a car. It's a compact psychological storm packed with ideas that sneak up on you like a shadow on a dark road. On the surface, you might say it's about survival. Sure, Mallory's fighting to stay alive, but the movie isn't content with that simple explanation. Nope, it digs deeper into what survival really means when your mind and your environment turn against you. One of the loudest themes rattling through Curve is isolation. And not just physical isolation but emotional and psychological isolation. Here's Mallory, stuck in this metal box, cut off from help, surrounded by cold wilderness. But the real prison is her own mind. The movie constantly plays with the idea that when you're alone, your own fears and memories become your worst enemies. The car is a cage, but so is her past, her trauma, and the creeping dread that she might not be able to trust her own judgment. It's a brutal look at how loneliness warps reality, and Curve makes you feel that warping, almost like a slow mental unraveling. And then there's the theme of control, or rather, the illusion of control. Mallory starts the film confident, maybe even a little cocky, cruising along her road trip. But everything that happens shatters that illusion. The crash isn't just a plot device. It's a symbolic reset. Suddenly, the neat plans, the sense of security, the predictability of life, all gone. Curve plays with the idea that control is fragile, slipping through your fingers when you least expect it. The film asks, what do you do when control vanishes? How do you fight back when the rules change without warning? And Mallory's journey is as much about reclaiming mental control as it is about escaping physical danger. Fear is another big player here, but not just fear of death or injury. It's fear of the unknown, fear of being powerless, fear of what lurks beyond the visible. Christian, the stranger outside the car, embodies that primal fear, the unknown threat, the creepy presence that might or might not be real in a traditional sense but is definitely real in Mallory's mind. The film blurs the line between actual danger and psychological torment. Is Christian really there? Or is he a manifestation of her panic? The film doesn't hand you answers, which is way more unsettling than a clear-cut villain. Another interesting theme Curve toys with is resilience, but it's not your usual triumphant, I survived story. It's messy and uncertain. Mallory's resilience is raw and jagged. It's about surviving through sheer stubbornness, through moments of despair and tiny sparks of hope that feel fragile as glass. The film seems to say resilience isn't a shiny badge. It's a grinding process, a slow crawl through darkness with no promises. And that makes it feel honest and human. The theme of perception versus reality also sneaks in. Mallory's hallucinations and disorientation make you question what's real and what's not. And that ambiguity ties into bigger questions about how we experience trauma and fear. How does the mind protect itself? How does it distort danger or hope? The film doesn't explain this explicitly, but it lets you live it through its visual and narrative style. Finally, there's a subtle nod to the idea of confronting your own demons, literally and figuratively. Mallory's external struggle in the car is mirrored by an internal battle with guilt, fear, and memories that haunt her. The character Christian isn't just a physical threat. He feels like a ghost from her past, a symbol of everything she's trying to outrun or suppress. The film layers these ideas in a way that keeps you thinking long after the credits roll. So yeah, Curve is wrapped in survival and suspense, but underneath it all, it's a meditation on isolation, control, fear, resilience, and the blurry line between reality and the mind's shadows. It doesn't shove these themes in your face. Instead, it lets them breathe, haunt, and simmer. And that's what makes peeling back the layers of this film such a fascinating ride. When it comes to Curve and its visual effects, you might be surprised because this isn't a film that throws CGI around like confetti at a party. Instead, the visual effects are like the quiet ninja in the background, sneaking in to support the story without ever stealing the spotlight. The film leans heavily on practical effects, which makes total sense given how much of the movie happens inside and around a crashed car stuck on the edge of a cliff. It's gritty, real, and visceral, and that grounded feel is exactly what the film needs to keep the tension tight. The practical effects shine when it comes to the car crash itself. The smashed-up vehicle looks authentic, battered, and utterly claustrophobic, giving you that, yep, this could totally happen vibe. You feel the crunch of metal, the sharp edges pressing in on Mallory's space, and that adds an intense layer of realism that digital effects might have dulled. The confined setting is almost a character on its own, and the practical effects make sure you believe in that space. The way the light fractures through broken glass, the subtle movements of the damaged doors, even the grime and dirt clinging to surfaces. All those details come alive through hands-on effects that keep the environment tactile and immersive. Now, don't get me wrong, there are some digital effects in the film, but they're used sparingly and smartly. You won't see flashy explosions or over-the-top CGI creatures. Instead, CGI steps in to enhance scenes that would be too dangerous or impossible to shoot practically, like the precarious positioning of the car on that cliff or certain atmospheric touches like mist or shadow play that heighten the eerie mood. These digital elements blend so seamlessly that you barely notice them. It's a testament to the film's careful craftsmanship that the CGI never pulls you out of the story or feels out of place. One of the clever uses of visual effects is during the more surreal or hallucinatory moments when Mallory's grip on reality starts to slip. Here, subtle digital tweaks distort the environment just enough to make you question what's real without hitting you over the head with obvious effects. Maybe a shadow stretches unnaturally, or the background warps slightly. Little visual nudges that keep you on edge and immersed in Mallory's fractured perspective. It's all done with a light touch, proving that sometimes less is more when it comes to blending practical and digital effects. In fact, the restraint shown in the visual effects is what helps maintain the claustrophobic tension that defines Curve. There's no temptation to break free from the tight, tense world the film creates. Instead, every effect, practical or digital, is there to support the feeling of being trapped, vulnerable, and desperate. It's like the film's effects team said, let's keep it real, keep it gritty, and only add a little magic where it's absolutely needed. So, overall, the visual effects and CGI in Curve don't scream for attention. They slip in quietly, amplify the story's atmosphere, and keep you fully hooked in that terrifying world without ever feeling artificial or distracting. It's a masterclass in subtlety, showing that you don't always need big flashy effects to make a movie visually compelling. Sometimes you just need the right balance between the real and the unreal. When it comes to Curve, the set design and locations are basically the unsung heroes of this nail-biting thriller. The film is a masterclass in using a limited space to crank up tension, and the way the production team nails the setting makes all the difference between feeling like you're watching a simple car accident drama or being sucked into a claustrophobic nightmare that won't let go. The primary location, the crashed car perched precariously on the edge of a winding mountain road, feels like a character in its own right, full of menace and secrets. Let's talk about the car first. It's not just a vehicle. It's a prison, a battleground, and a cage. The production design ensures every dent, shattered window, and twisted metal piece looks like it's lived through hell and back. The confined interior is packed with realistic details. A cracked rearview mirror, a sticky dashboard, the crushed roof pressing down, all of which contribute to that suffocating vibe. You don't just see the space, you feel it. It's tight, uncomfortable, and you get the sense that any movement could be dangerous. That's no accident. The set designers clearly obsessively studied the anatomy of a wrecked car to make it as believable as possible, and the results pay off by keeping you glued in that tiny, terrifying space. Then there's the outside world. The rugged cliffside, the twisting roads, the wild forests, and the endless sky. These natural locations do more than just look pretty. They amplify the sense of isolation and danger. The steep drop-offs, the jagged rocks below, and the dense foliage surrounding the road all create a perfect storm of visual storytelling. You feel the sheer drop beneath the car, the cold wind whispering danger, and the loneliness of being stranded far from help. The contrast between the claustrophobic car interior and the vast, unforgiving outdoors keeps the tension tight and the stakes high. Props and small details around the set also add layers to the story. From Mallory's scattered belongings in the car to the blood smudges and broken glass, every piece feels deliberately placed to tell a part of her story and heighten the realism. You don't get any flashy or distracting elements. Everything is stripped down and raw, just like the movie's tone. It's a subtle but powerful choice that keeps you focused on the survival struggle without unnecessary visual noise. The production team's clever use of limited space is especially impressive because they turn potential restrictions into storytelling advantages. Instead of feeling boxed in by a small set, the film uses every inch of that crushed car to build suspense. Shadows stretch across the cramped interior, reflections in the glass create eerie doubles, and the shifting light outside signals changing time and danger. It's like the environment breathes with Mallory's panic, and that intimacy pulls you even deeper into her ordeal. So whether it's the jagged mountain road, the crushed car, or the tiny details that make the set feel lived in and dangerous, the locations and design in Curve don't just hold the story, they tell the story. They build a believable, intense world that traps you alongside Mallory, making every moment feel immediate and urgent. It's a brilliant example of how great set design and location choices can turn a simple premise into a gripping cinematic experience. Curve's dialogue and script are a fascinating study in restraint and precision, especially considering how much of the film's tension relies on silence and atmosphere rather than chatter. Because let's face it, when you're trapped in a tiny, crumpled car teetering on the edge of a cliff, there's not a whole lot of room for lengthy speeches or clever banter. So the script smartly keeps things tight, realistic, and loaded with emotional weight that punches well above its few words. The dialogue feels incredibly natural because it mimics how someone in a crisis might actually speak. Terse, clipped, sometimes frantic, sometimes quiet with moments of desperate reasoning or pleading. It's not polished or overly stylized. It's raw and authentic, which makes it hit harder. Every line Mallory utters feels like it's born out of survival instinct, rather than a scriptwriter trying to be clever. That authenticity makes the moments when she talks to herself, or even to the threatening stranger outside the car, feel gripping rather than gimmicky. What's particularly interesting is how the script uses silence and minimal speech as a storytelling tool. The spaces between words carry as much meaning as the words themselves. The pauses, the breaths, the half-formed thoughts, those are where tension really bubbles up. You feel the weight of unsaid fears and memories lurking behind Mallory's few spoken lines, which adds an intense psychological layer to the script. It's like the dialogue isn't just about communication. It's about the struggle to hold on to sanity and hope when everything else is falling apart. There are a few standout lines that linger, not because they're flashy or quotable in a traditional sense, but because they're loaded with desperation and vulnerability. When Mallory tries to reason with Christian or talks to herself to stay calm, those moments feel brutally honest. The script doesn't waste time on witty quips or clever catchphrases. Instead, it opts for impactful simplicity. The words become weapons or lifelines, and that rawness makes the dialogue stick with you long after the scene ends. The script also does a fantastic job of layering emotional subtext beneath the surface. What Mallory says might be simple, but you sense the weight of her backstory, guilt, and trauma behind every exchange. It's like you're hearing just the tip of an iceberg of emotion, which invites you to fill in the gaps and engage deeply with the character's inner turmoil. In short, Curve's script is a masterclass in less is more. It knows when to speak, when to whisper, and when to stay silent. The dialogue doesn't distract from the mood. It sharpens it. It's sparse, natural, and brutally effective, capturing the claustrophobic panic and fragile hope of someone caught between survival and surrender. It's not about flashy lines but about words that feel lived, breathed, and desperately clung to in the face of fear. Curve dives headfirst into the survival thriller genre, but it's no cookie-cutter flick following the usual checklist of crashes, escapes, and last-minute saves. Instead, it plays with the conventions in a way that feels fresh, tight, and much more claustrophobic than your typical adrenaline rush. The film takes that classic trapped person in danger setup and squeezes every ounce of tension out of it without ever letting things get predictable or boring. First off, the movie understands that the survival thriller isn't just about the physical danger. It's about the psychological game too. So while the car dangling over the cliff is the immediate threat, the real nail-biting moments come from Mallory's mental battle. That's a clever twist on the genre because instead of just running or fighting, she's fighting her own mind and the creeping paranoia about the stranger lurking outside. This isn't your usual action hero versus villain showdown. It's a slow burn where the line between reality and fear blurs, keeping you guessing. The film also dials way back on the usual explosion-filled sequences or big-budget spectacle that survival thrillers sometimes lean on. Instead, it leans heavily into minimalism, limited locations, a tiny cast, and a story mostly confined to a crushed car. That stripped-down approach could feel limiting, but here it works wonders by cranking up the suspense and making every moment feel urgent. It's like survival horror and thriller got cozy and decided to keep things tight and tense rather than flashy and noisy. What's refreshing is how Curve manages to build suspense through the slow reveal. It doesn't spill all its secrets right away. Instead, it teases, it hints, and it lets you piece together what's really going on bit by bit. The mystery of Christian, the unseen threat outside the car, plays on a classic trope, the unknown predator. But the film keeps it ambiguous enough to avoid cliché territory. It's not just about a villain. It's about fear itself, which is a smart subversion. While Curve doesn't exactly serve up humor like a buddy cop flick, it doesn't pretend to be grim all the way either. There are subtle moments where Mallory's internal monologue or quick thinking adds a bit of dry wit or sarcastic edge that lightens the mood just enough to keep the tension from becoming overwhelming. It's a nice balance that keeps you emotionally invested without wearing you down. Drama. Absolutely. The film dives deep into emotional stakes, using the physical predicament to explore vulnerability, resilience, and fear. But it never gets overly sentimental or melodramatic. It keeps the drama grounded in the moment, which is more impactful because it feels real. So in terms of genre execution, Curve knows the survival thriller playbook but doesn't just follow it slavishly. It strips away excess, plays with psychological tension, and keeps you on the edge by mixing mystery with raw, physical danger. It's a fresh take that feels less like a checklist and more like an intense, personal fight to stay alive, inside and out. Curve might seem like a straightforward survival thriller on the surface. Just a woman trapped in a car on the edge of a cliff, right? But peel back that layer, and you'll find a surprisingly sharp undercurrent of social and cultural commentary that sneaks in without ever feeling preachy or forced. The film uses its tense, claustrophobic setup as a way to explore some pretty complex themes about vulnerability, trust, and the harsh realities many people face in moments of crisis. One of the strongest threads running through Curve is the idea of power dynamics and how easily they can shift when someone is put in a vulnerable position. Mallory's struggle isn't just against the physical danger of the crash or the looming threat outside the car. It's also about the psychological manipulation and fear that come from being isolated and at someone else's mercy. That taps into a bigger conversation about how society often fails those in moments of need and how fear can be weaponized to control or break someone down. The film also touches subtly on themes related to gender and survival. Mallory is a woman caught in a terrifying situation where her strength and resourcefulness are tested, but so is how she's perceived and treated by the stranger outside the car. The way the film portrays her fight is a quiet commentary on resilience, but also on the realities many women face in dangerous or hostile environments. It doesn't shout feminist slogans or make overt political statements, but the underlying message about survival and agency feels relevant and resonant in today's conversations around safety and autonomy. There's also a broader cultural reflection on isolation and fear that feels very contemporary. In a world where people can feel increasingly disconnected or threatened by the unknown, whether that's strangers, mental health struggles, or sudden crises, the movie captures that universal anxiety perfectly. It's like Curve taps into this collective fear of being alone and vulnerable, stuck somewhere you can't escape, and having to face your worst nightmares with no help in sight. That feeling resonates beyond the story, making the film feel timely without being overt. What's impressive is that these social and cultural layers are woven into the story so naturally that you might not notice them on a first watch. They don't interrupt the tension or slow down the pacing. Instead, they add depth beneath the surface. It's like the film is saying, here's a gripping survival story, but hey, let's also think about what it means to be truly trapped, not just physically but emotionally and socially. That subtlety makes the commentary feel honest and impactful, not like it was shoehorned in to sound important. So while Curve doesn't parade around with a big social justice banner, it quietly asks some tough questions about fear, power, and survival in today's world. It handles those topics with a light but thoughtful touch, making you think while you're gripping the edge of your seat. It's social commentary disguised as a thriller, and that makes it all the more interesting. Curve grabs you by the collar from the very first frame and doesn't let go, creating a kind of emotional roller coaster that hits multiple gears. Fear, frustration, desperation, and yes, even moments where you catch your breath with disbelief or tense anticipation. It's the kind of film that makes your heart race, not because of over-the-top explosions, but because it makes you feel trapped alongside Mallory in that shrinking space. That emotional resonance is where the film really scores. There are moments that trigger a visceral reaction so immediate you almost forget you're watching a movie. When Mallory is locked inside the car and time seems to crawl, you might find yourself holding your breath, leaning forward, or even tensing up like you're sharing her panic. It's not just about the danger. It's about that gut-level fear of helplessness that the film nails with precision. You can't help but get emotionally tangled in her struggle because it's so stripped down and raw. Surprisingly, there are also subtle moments that might even make you chuckle or smirk, not because the movie tries to be funny, but because of the sheer determination and quick thinking Mallory shows. Those small flashes of dry humor or sarcasm feel like brief human sparks in a suffocating situation. They remind you that even in the worst crises, people find ways to cope with humor or defiance. That blend of tension and small emotional relief keeps the experience dynamic and engaging. What's really interesting about Curve is how it invites you to keep thinking about it well after the credits roll. The ambiguous motives of the stranger outside, the mystery of Mallory's past, and the nature of her predicament make it perfect for discussion. It's the kind of film where you might want to watch it again just to catch details you missed or to see the story from a new angle, piecing together clues and questioning what really happened. That kind of engagement is gold for any thriller because it turns passive watching into active mental involvement. The film also sparks deep reflection on fear and survival, encouraging viewers to imagine themselves in Mallory's shoes. How would you react in such a dire situation? What decisions would you make when every second counts? That emotional mirroring pulls you closer to the story, making it more than just entertainment. It becomes a personal experience. This is why Curve resonates so powerfully with audiences looking for thrills that also engage the mind and heart. So, whether it's the pulse-pounding suspense that tightens your chest, the fleeting moments of dry wit that make you nod in appreciation, or the lingering questions that keep you talking afterward, Curve hooks you emotionally from start to finish. It's a roller coaster that's as much about feeling as it is about watching, making every viewer feel like they've been on the edge right there with Mallory. When you put Curve side by side with other survival thrillers, it's like finding a diamond in the rough. Small in scale but packing a punch where it counts. It doesn't have the sprawling wilderness or massive set pieces of films like 127 Hours or The Revenant, but it still manages to create a claustrophobic tension that feels just as intense, if not more so, because the danger is so immediate and confined. Instead of nature versus man, it's really about man versus physics and psychology, which gives it a unique flavor in a genre often dominated by vast landscapes and epic survival odds. Compared to classic car trap thrillers like Phone Booth or Lock, Curve shares that sense of confinement and urgency but takes the idea a step further by mixing in an external, human threat that ratchets up the tension beyond just the physical trap. That added layer turns the film from a simple "can they escape" scenario into a nerve-wracking psychological battle. It feels like the space between Buried, where the protagonist is literally buried alive, and more action-oriented survival flicks. It's lean, tense, and smart in how it uses very little space to tell a big story. If you're familiar with the director's earlier work, Curve fits well into the pattern of creating tight, character-driven suspense but also shows growth in how minimalistic storytelling can be so effective. This film doesn't rely on flash or over-the-top thrills but trusts the power of subtle acting, sound design, and story to pull viewers in. It's a more focused, refined effort that proves sometimes less really is more when it comes to keeping you glued to the screen. In terms of fresh ideas, Curve excels in making you rethink the classic survival setup. Instead of sprawling adventures, it's about micro-survival, the minute-to-minute fight against crushing metal, a threatening figure, and rising panic. That claustrophobia and psychological edge make it stand apart from more formulaic survival stories that might feel repetitive or predictable. It's as if the film took the genre's staples and squeezed them through a magnifying glass to show the tiniest, most nerve-wracking details. Where some survival thrillers might throw in cliched heroic speeches or unbelievable physical feats, Curve keeps things believable and grounded, which makes the suspense more immediate and the stakes feel real. The film doesn't just want you to cheer for the hero. It wants you to experience the desperation, confusion, and raw fear alongside her. All in all, Curve carves out its own niche within the survival thriller realm. It respects the genre's traditions but isn't afraid to strip things down to the bare essentials, making every moment count. It's a tightrope walk of tension and psychology that offers a fresh, compelling twist on a story type we think we know, proving there's still plenty of room to surprise us in even the smallest of settings. Curve is like a treasure chest packed with subtle symbolism and clever metaphors that sneak in under the radar while you're busy holding your breath. The film isn't just about a woman trapped in a car on the edge of a cliff. It's a layered exploration of vulnerability, control, and the fragile line between life and death, all wrapped up in visual and narrative cues that add depth without slowing down the pace. Take the car itself. This isn't just a vehicle. It's a powerful symbol of both confinement and fragile safety. On one hand, it's Mallory's prison, a metallic cage that's slowly losing its battle against gravity. But on the other, it's also her sanctuary, the one thing protecting her from the unknown dangers lurking outside. That duality mirrors the human condition in crisis. The places or situations we rely on can simultaneously trap us and save us, depending on how the situation unfolds. The car's precarious position on the cliff's edge becomes a metaphor for that razor-thin balance between survival and disaster, control and chaos. The looming cliff and the abyss below amplify the theme of the unknown. What lies beneath is a dark, silent void, just like the fear gnawing at Mallory's mind. It's not just a physical drop. It's the emotional and psychological cliff we all face when confronted with trauma or isolation. The film uses this visual motif to constantly remind us how close she is to the edge, not just physically but mentally, highlighting the fine line between holding on and letting go. Christian, the mysterious figure outside the car, isn't just a straightforward antagonist. He functions as a shadowy representation of external threats that prey on vulnerability. His presence taps into deeper fears about trust and danger from the outside world, acting almost like a personification of fear itself. The back and forth between Mallory and Christian plays out like a dance of control and power, which echoes larger themes about how fear can dominate or be overcome. The film also plays with light and darkness in symbolic ways. The confined car interior is often dim or shadowy, emphasizing isolation and uncertainty, while glimpses of light outside represent hope but also expose threats. That contrast between light and dark isn't just visual. It's emotional, underscoring Mallory's struggle between despair and determination. Another neat metaphor is Mallory's use of quick thinking and resourcefulness. Her clever attempts to escape become a symbol of human resilience. It's not just about brute strength. It's about mental agility and willpower, the internal sparks that keep us alive in dire moments. Even the small details, like the cracks forming in the car's windshield, can be read as symbolic fractures, not just in the vehicle, but in Mallory's sense of security and mental state. Each crack grows until the whole world feels like it's shattering around her, which perfectly aligns with the escalating tension. All these layers of symbolism and metaphor turn Curve into more than just a nail-biting thriller. They invite viewers to dive beneath the surface, making every creak of metal and shadowy glance outside the window carry a deeper weight. It's a masterclass in how to pack meaning into every frame, transforming a simple survival story into a rich exploration of fear, strength, and the human spirit's precarious hold on life. Curve doesn't come from a sprawling franchise or a long-running series, which actually works in its favor because it stands on its own as a tight, focused story without the baggage of sequels or extended universes. This film is like a little gem nestled in the survival thriller genre, showing that you don't need multiple installments or a complex backstory to deliver an intense, gripping experience. It's a standalone tale, And that independence lets it keep the tension laser-focused on Mallory's immediate fight for survival without distracting subplots or franchise setups. If you look at it in the broader context of survival thrillers throughout film history, Curve feels like a modern evolution of a classic concept. It taps into a long tradition of single-location thrillers, think films like Buried or Phone Booth, where the entire story unfolds within a confined space, and the suspense comes from the protagonist's interaction with that space and an external threat. In that sense, Curve fits neatly into a lineage of films that challenge the idea of survival by emphasizing psychological tension over physical spectacle. It's also interesting to consider how Curve reflects contemporary filmmaking trends where minimalism and atmosphere often trump elaborate sets or big-budget effects. This film's lean narrative and tight runtime mirror the shift toward more intimate, character-driven stories that make the audience feel every second alongside the protagonist. It's a clear example of how the survival thriller genre is evolving, where it's less about sprawling wilderness or epic quests and more about raw, immediate, and relatable peril. Looking at the historical context of when Curve was released, it arrived at a time when audiences were increasingly drawn to tense, grounded thrillers that explore fear and vulnerability in close quarters. This was a period where psychological horror and thriller elements started blending more seamlessly, and Curve rides that wave perfectly by creating an atmosphere thick with dread and uncertainty, all without relying on supernatural elements or elaborate conspiracies. So while it's not part of a franchise or historical epic, Curve contributes to the survival thriller genre's ongoing story by proving how powerful a simple, well-executed concept can be. It's a tight little package that honors its cinematic ancestors while carving out its own place in the modern thriller landscape. Its standalone nature means it can be enjoyed anytime, without needing background knowledge or previous films, which makes it accessible and refreshing in a world full of cinematic universes and sequels. Curve is one of those films that proves you don't need a blockbuster budget to deliver a high-quality, suspense-filled experience. Its production costs were relatively modest compared to the big studio thrillers with massive sets, CGI, and star-studded ensembles. Instead, the film maximizes every dollar by focusing on a tight, contained story in a limited setting, a clever move that channels tension and creativity rather than expensive spectacle. This budget-conscious approach actually works in Curve's favor, because the confined environment feels authentic and claustrophobic rather than artificially staged. When you look at production quality, it punches well above its weight. The cinematography, sound design, and acting all come together to create a gripping atmosphere that doesn't feel cheap or rushed. The filmmakers clearly understood how to stretch the budget effectively, using practical effects and minimal locations to keep things believable and intense. The slick editing and careful pacing also make sure the story feels tight and engaging without unnecessary fluff, another smart use of resources. Financially, Curve wasn't a massive box office hit, but it found its audience in a niche market that appreciates psychological thrillers and minimalist horror. It's the kind of film that often does better on streaming platforms and home video rather than in wide theatrical release, which has become a common trend for smaller budget thrillers. Word of mouth and positive audience reception helped it carve out a respectable space among thriller fans, even if it didn't dominate the box office charts. Marketing for Curve played a role in setting the right expectations. Trailers and promotions focused on the suspense and confined setting, appealing directly to viewers who enjoy tense, edge-of-the-seat thrillers. This targeted approach was smart, although the film's low profile and lack of major star power meant it flew under the radar for many mainstream moviegoers. That kind of marketing is a double-edged sword. It attracts the right audience but limits broader exposure. Ultimately, Curve is a classic example of a lean, well-crafted thriller that achieves a lot with a little. It might not have broken box office records, but it succeeded in delivering a satisfying high-quality product that audiences who discovered it appreciate deeply. Its budget versus production quality ratio is a win for smart filmmaking, showing how focus and creativity can outweigh big spending. If you're wondering where to catch Curve and dive into this pulse-pounding survival thriller, you're in luck because it's widely accessible across several platforms, making it easy to find your perfect viewing setup. While it may not be lighting up the big screens in major theaters anymore, Curve has found a cozy home on digital streaming and rental services, which is actually great news for viewers who want to watch it at their own pace and in their own space. Most commonly, you'll find Curve available on popular streaming platforms where you can either watch it as part of a subscription or grab it as a digital rental or purchase. Services like Amazon Prime Video, Google Play Movies, iTunes, and YouTube Movies typically host the film, giving you the freedom to choose whether you want to rent it for one-time viewing or add it to your digital library for repeated thrills. These options make it super convenient to watch Curve whether you're curled up at home on your couch or streaming on a tablet during a road trip. For the fullest impact, watching Curve on a larger screen with good sound quality is highly recommended. The film's tension and suspense rely heavily on atmosphere, close-up shots, and subtle sound cues, so a TV or projector setup paired with quality speakers or headphones can really elevate the experience. Small screens and poor audio might make you miss some of the details that keep the tension simmering, so setting the scene with dim lighting and minimal distractions will let the movie work its magic. If you prefer physical copies, some regions might have Curve available on DVD or Blu-ray, complete with bonus features like director commentary or behind-the-scenes footage that add another layer of insight into the filmmaking process. For collectors or fans who want a tangible keepsake, this is a nice option, though it's becoming less common in the streaming era. In short, Curve is readily accessible and can fit into your movie night plans with ease. Whether you stream it instantly or download it for offline viewing, the film's gripping premise and tight pacing make it a perfect pick when you want a thriller that hooks you fast and keeps you guessing till the very end. Just make sure you're settled in with some snacks and a cozy spot. This is one ride you'll want to buckle up for.